Hi, and welcome to Go to Hell with Erica and Kelly. We are back for another awesome episode. So, we have Gail with us today. She's going to be sharing her testimony, another awesome story to hopefully just encourage you and help you see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And so, as you guys know, what we are looking for here is we're just collecting lots of testimonies and stories of people going through difficult times and just how God's mercy steps in, intervenes, and sends whatever needs to go back to hell, and just bring us into the light of God's goodness. So, Gail, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. How are you doing today?
Me. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Kelly, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic over here. I'm ready to hear an amazing story today.
Awesome. So we'll kick this off by asking you, Gail, just our icebreaker. We ask everyone, if you could send anything to hell, what would it be? And maybe why?
Hands down, 1000%, all mice of the world, all rats of the world. I won't say like all rodents, because rodents are probably, it's a larger category of animals that we may need in the wild for other reasons that I'm not aware of. But mice, rats, particularly in cities, like absolutely. They're the bane of my existence.
Okay, it seems like this is a pretty visceral topic for you, the topic of rats. Did you have a bad encounter one time, or why is it so traumatic?
Kelly, I wish it was one time. If it was one time, maybe I would have mercy. But there's no mercy in my heart towards mice. I've battled rodent problems in many different places I've lived, both here and in DC and also in New York, and it's just
oh wow,
constant.
Rats all over the nation.
Exactly. Oh, and also in Ann Arbor when I lived there. I mean, it's just, yeah, they follow me, and it's terrible, and they're unsanitary, and they're not pretty, and they don't do anything for us. They just steal our warmth and our food, and just sort of freeloaders.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, I guess prayers for Gail and her battle against the rodents. Yikes.
Thank you. I'll take them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that was shocking, but we can move on. That just got really personal really fast. Okay.
It's an icebreaker, right? We've broken it now.
Yeah.
Now we're in the cold
Gail.
water. Now we're in the cold
we'll
water
have to have a check-in in season 2 to see how you're doing in the rat war.
Yeah, please do. Someone's got to check in on me.
Yeah, we will be looking out for you as a community here.
Great.
We got your back.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so Gail, I guess our next question, we just want to know a little bit more about you, kind of where you're at, what you do for work, just a little bit about yourself, besides just being tormented by rodents wherever you live.
Yeah, so let's just when I'm not battling rodents, I'm battling for justice. No, I'm a lawyer. I live in Washington, D.C. Specifically, I'm a public defender, so I represent people who are charged with crimes who don't have the money to hire an attorney, which is almost everyone who are charged with crimes in this country. So that's what I do.
Yeah. So what made you want to go into that?
Wow, that's like a part 2 of this podcast, I guess. But what made me go into that? A series of things, kind of starting with seeing. I'm an immigrant, so my family is from Ghana, and I grew up in the UK and then in Connecticut, and we sort of came to this country with the promise of the American dream, that if you come here and you work hard, no matter who you are or what you look like you will succeed. And I just sort of noticed growing up that wasn't always true for people who looked like me. That wasn't always true for Black and brown people that had been here for generations. Um, and I just started getting curious about why that was, and that sort of led me on a journey to dig more into our history and African American history and public policy. Um, and criminal justice reform and mass incarceration. And I learned more about mass incarceration in college and how that was a linchpin to cycles of poverty. And so the Lord really kind of led me, even before I knew the Lord, He was leading me on that path. I just, when I still remember the day when when mass incarceration, like the idea of it really gripped my heart. And I was like, we can't be free as a nation and as a people unless we solve this problem. We need another way to tackle the social ills and tackle our brokenness than locking people away for decades and forgetting about them. That's not the Lord's hand of mercy and grace and restoration. There's no restoration in that. It just begets more brokenness. So that's what led me here.
Wow. Yeah, no restoration and no real justice either.
Right. Depending on I guess your definition of justice. But yes, I agree with that, Erica. I agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So when you said you remember the day when God really gripped your heart for that, how long has this been on your heart? So that was a very specific memory for you.
Yeah, since college. I remember I was like in a sociology class, and it was like a class on race and ethnicity. And I just remember that day. And I didn't know the Lord at that point, but I just knew like this is the way, and this is the way I'm meant to walk in, right?
Yeah.
That this is what I'm meant to dismantle. That was probably 2012, 2011, around there.
Okay.
Sophomore year of college. Yeah.
So you've been walking this out for a long time.
I guess a minute. Thank you for reminding me that I'm old, but yeah.
We're in this together, Gail, okay?
Yeah, true.
Erica loves to remind people.
Yeah.
Erica just loves to remind us all that time just is running out.
Yeah, I just try to warn the younger generation, like the years go on. They really do.
They really do. You're hanging young forever. This life is a vapor. Do what the Lord calls you to do. You know?
Yeah, yes. Exactly.
Time is evil. You have to use it wisely.
You do.
Yeah.
All right. So, let's hear your story. Let's hear. Now, I know that could have been a whole other podcast just talking about your passion for that.
Next time.
I know. I'm like, I have so many questions, but I know that's not 100% why we're here. So, yeah, we just want to give you complete free reign to talk about what the Lord has done in your life. So, go for it.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'll start by answering the question that I know you guys ask at the end, unless you want me to wait. I don't want to disrupt your flow.
You go for it.
Wow, thank you. So what the Lord sent to hell for me was false identities, and particularly the kind of the primary identity that He sent to hell that brought me to Him was my sexual identity. And sort of the lie that you are who you believe yourself to be attracted to. So I'll kind of back up. Like I said, my family's from Ghana. Great country, by the way. We have superior jollof. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise, okay? My parents moved to the UK a couple years before I was born, and that's where I was born. And then we moved to Connecticut when I was 8. And I have 2 younger sisters. In terms of religious background, where was Christ in the home as I was growing up? I wouldn't say that God played like a prominent role in our home. I felt like we went to church, but church was very siloed to Sunday mornings, and there wasn't really much. Wasn't like seeking the Lord together. I didn't necessarily see my parents praying a lot. We didn't pray together as a family. We were sort of like learning about. I didn't feel like I was being like discipled in spiritual disciplines or or in the ways of Christ growing up. Um, and church was sort of more like a cultural thing. Um, my parents, I mean, they're, I think growing up, my parents gave everything to come to this country, right? They sacrificed a lot for us to make it to the UK and to make it here. Um, and I think from their perspective, it was like, we brought you to America, so happy birthday forever, right? Like, you don't have to worry about anything. Like, just go to school and work really hard. You don't have to worry about food on your table. You don't have to worry about the lights being cut off and having enough electricity and all the things that they worried about when they were growing up, right? And so there was a lot of, and I'm the firstborn, there's a lot of sort of pressure to perform. There's a lot of pressure to earn my parents' approval, pressure to be the best. My dad would sit me down and say, "You have to be the best at everything. Everything you do, you have to excel. You have to be the best." And that I just internalized all of that. That love was earned. That acceptance and approval was earned. And if I wasn't getting it, I just wasn't working hard enough for it. I wasn't doing the right things for it. Sort of all the while that was happening, I knew from like a very young age that I was attracted to other girls. And I knew that since I was like 5. And I didn't know the words for it, right? I didn't know terms, gay, homosexuality or any of that. All I knew was that like it wasn't a kind of relationship I could see in the world. There weren't marriages that I can see in the world that matched how I was feeling. And at least at that time in the 90s and early 2000s. And I sort of knew that it was wrong. And so I sort of vowed to not tell anyone and just sort of kind of buried that in my heart from a young age. And then when I was, let's say, 12 years old, so I was in 7th grade, I didn't plan this at all. It just like happened. I was at school, and then one day I just came out to someone. And I just remember this massive relief. And I just sort of went on like a coming out spree, and just tell like anyone that would listen. And I grew up in not like a rural town, but it's a relatively small kind of suburban town. And news got out, and my parents found out, and they both had very different but very kind of visceral reactions. My mom was really heartbroken. My dad was really angry, and they both sort of they both reacted in different ways, but both ways that they reacted was really deeply hurtful, and experienced a lot of rejection during that time, and very much felt like I was not part of the family anymore, that I wasn't wanted anymore. And there was a time when there were talks about kicking me out of the house and sending me back to Ghana and things like that, and things that were even more drastic, but I won't necessarily get into here. But I sort of, it was basically everything that I feared would happened at that time. And, as I was like reflecting before this, I was like, wow, like the enemy was really working, because the enemy was like, before I came out, like the enemy was telling me like, you will always feel rejected because no one knows the real you, right? So you're like, as long as you're in the closet, like people will say they love you, but they don't really love you because they don't even really know you. And then I came out and was rejected by my family. Like, what? Like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Like, now they know the real you, and they still don't love you. Like, wow, how deeply unlovable are you? You really like. There's nothing that you could ever do to like make someone accept you. You won't be good enough. Like you, whether you are trying to be perfect, you will always fail. Whether you're being yourself, you will fail. You won't be accepted, and you just sort of have to come up with a way to shapeshift and cope. Um, and so that's sort of what I did. What I'm very, very, very thankful for, and what I understand is the complete mercy of God, is that during that time, I never had any suicidal ideations. I never felt depressed. Um, I felt a lot of nothing, probably, and I learned very well how to compartmentalize things, and to find ways to um, be myself and express myself, and cope with music and with comedy, and with like shows I'd watch in school and sports and friends, and just try to like just try to move on as best as I can, and survive. Basically, I was just sort of in survival mode. I knew I couldn't feel all the things under the surface, and so I was just kind of like going on autopilot until I could leave the house, right? Until I graduated. Um, the kind of the jumping back just a little bit, the way that period of my life sort of ended, I moved on to this sort of autopilot period when when I had come out and was 12. My dad had printed out this sort of stack of papers from Bible.com about like why homosexuality was a sin, and kind of gave me this big stack, put it on my bunk bed, and I was like, read this and like come talk to me about it. I proceeded to not read it, and then I came to talk to him, and he was like, "All right, so um, is this something like you need help with, or is this a phase?" And I was really scared about what his idea of help was. At that time, we sort of went to we'd been in some like church circles where you'd like see people falling out, and I kind of understood what it meant for someone to be like demon possessed, and like then be like have demons be cast out of them, and all of that looked really scary. And I was like, is that what they're gonna do to me? I don't know what that even is. I don't even want to go there. And I knew it wasn't a phase, but I was like, I just said, yeah, it's a phase. And we just sort of moved on. But, it was always still this big elephant in the room, right? And I was still felt just as rejected, but just sort of coped through it.
So with your family,
Yeah.
you described how initially their response was extreme. There were a lot of extreme discussions happening of like what to do, how to respond. And then later on, your dad comes to you with, the printout and everything. What did you see a change in your parents and their own processing of like how you were presenting yourself? Like, did you see them trying to, after that initial reaction, like bridge the gap, so to speak, or did they stay hands off most of the time?
That's a good question. I think that there was, at random times, there were like conversations that were had that would try to address like how I presented myself, right? How try to address how I would dress, or later on, I got a big haircut when I was in college, and that was a big controversy. Um, and My hair was always a controversy. So there were like little things, or they'd be like concerned about, and every once in a while they'd say something about it and be unhappy about it. And I knew that it was sort of like we were always talking on the surface, right? We were always talking, we weren't ever talking about the thing everyone was really addressing, which was my sexual identity. Um, but it was always like, what was the symptom? What was the fruit? But never the root, well, never the tree. And every once in a while that would happen. We would come at an impasse, or I would yield for a season so I could just cope, so I could survive, so we can move on, so there'd be some peace and not so much tension.
Right. And your siblings, you mentioned you're the oldest.
Yeah.
How many siblings do you have? Where were they in the story?
Yeah, so I have two younger sisters. They are 8 and 11 years younger than me. So they were when I was like in middle school, they were like, what?
Pretty young.
4 and 1, or right. So
Yeah.
they were like oblivious, right? They were,
okay.
Yeah, because they're just too young when all of this was going on. Yeah.
Right.
These are great questions. Yeah. So I was in survival mode until I got to college, and then college, I sort of just did my own thing. I still called home, and I still had, some relationship with my parents, but, otherwise I was sort of doing my own thing. I was fully in the world, doing all the things that the world says you need to do to be happy, right? And I was a DJ in college, and had that sort of DJ Gail Storm. So I had
the persona's coming out now.
So I'm just doing all that, and it's funny. Like, God was like the farthest thing from my mind, right? I didn't really care either way whether God existed. I was never atheist. I was never like I feel like atheists are more obsessed with the idea of God than anyone else. Right?
You're not wrong.
Right? You're so obsessed with God. Right? But I was like, I was indifferent. I was like, maybe he exists, maybe he doesn't. And if he does exist, like, I have no reason to think that he cares about me. I've no reason to think that he would accept me when my own parents don't. And so that's where I was at. But at the same time, it was really weird. Like, when push came to shove, like in the back of my mind, if I was scared about something or worried about something, I would, for some split moments, take solace in the fact that I knew that my parents went to church, and I knew that, like, my mom was praying for me. And I don't think that's even something I could have fully understood. I don't think at that age, even now, really, I don't think I could have articulated why that gave me any source of comfort, but it just did. And then this is sort of another story about how I just kind of knew that God was, well, at least subconsciously, that God was protecting me. When I studied abroad in Cape Town, South Africa, and yeah, it's great. The big draw or feature of Cape Town, of course, is Table Mountain. And Table Mountain is like right at the base of the University of Cape Town where I was. And I made friends with this guy, and we were we'd made plans to hike one of the summits of Table Mountain. And I was I 19, 20. My brain was not fully developed, and I was like, we were like, yeah, let's climb this mountain in the evening, which of course would mean that we'd be coming back down in like pitch darkness. Were we gonna bring a flashlight? No, that's too responsible. I had a light on my little like Nokia phone, so that was gonna do.
Yes, the Nokia phone, saving everyone's lives.
Right. That's what
Indestructible.
That's what everyone takes about Everest. Right. So that was the plan. And I remember that evening, he called me and he was like, oh, I can't go. I have to work late. And he was like so shocked too, because he had worked at this place for years and never once had his boss asked him to work late. But he was like, this never happened, but I have to work late, so we have to cancel. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, whatever. I didn't think much about it. We never rescheduled to do that hike, especially at night. And when I came home from Cape Town, I was, my parents have this pastor friend who is also basically a prophet. And my parents wanted me to join the phone call while they were praying with him, and I was just sort of sitting there listening. And he got this image of me like in a stretcher, like being carried down a mountain. And he's like,
structure?
A stretcher.
Oh, a stretcher. No.
Gail just in a structure.
Yeah, what? Sorry.
That's wild.
Yeah. So he had this image of me being carried down, and I was like, close to death. And he's like, Gail, do you know like anything like about this? Like what he's trying to figure out what the image was about too. I sat there for a while and I was like, I don't know what that could be about. And I was like, oh my gosh, Table Mountain. That is what the enemy had planned that night. And
Yikes.
The Lord saved me. And this is me still not believing in really, not professing any faith in God. And being like, what? Like, I don't even know how to explain that. But there's just like stuff that happened that I was like, wow. Like I don't know what's going on, but I know that there's something or someone that is protecting me for some reason. So anyway, I sort of, continued with college, and I fell in love with my best friend. We started dating, and I thought that we were going to get married. At least I was serious for a time. And then after college, moved to New York and worked as a paralegal in a really big law firm. And then, that year was really, really hard. My girlfriend and I broke up. We were still really good friends, though, and that made things really confusing. And just sort of in a dark place. I would have these, what I now know to be, I guess, sort of like anxiety or panic attacks. But I didn't recognize that at the time. I would just be kind of walking through New York, and all of a sudden I just couldn't breathe. And I didn't know why, or that would happen at work too. And work was very demanding, very stressful. Really hated it. I really loved the people, but the work itself was really soul sucking. And you're just like you're not in college anymore. You don't like live 2 feet away from all of your closest friends. And it felt kind of, isolating, just felt kind of lost and alone. And, but I think I needed kind of the shedding of all the distractions of the world to really start hearing from the Lord. And that's when he kind of put his rescue plan, if you will, into overdrive, was when I was there. So it was sort of like a series of weird things that would be happening. So my, so I lived in New York. My parents were in Connecticut. And so I'd go back and forth between New York and Connecticut here and there. I'd visit every once in a while. And my parents would really get on me about going to church. And I was like, I didn't want to go to church. I had no reason to go to church. But they were they were relentless. Kept asking. And I was like, I'm just, at this point, it was still sort of that thing in me where, like, I hated to, like, disappoint them. And I wanted to, be the perfect daughter. And so I hated every Sunday when I would call them and they were like, do you go to church? And I was like, no. And they'd be disappointed. And I was like, fine, like, I'll just find a place and I'll just go so I can check the box so I can tell them that I did it. The first church I went to was really small. And I remember, going with my best friend /ex, and she was visiting me that weekend, and I was like, I gotta go to church, so you can come or not. And she's like, all right, whatever, let's go. And we go, sit through the service, and at the end, they obviously spot that we're new because it's small, and they just, like, attack us. Not attack in a bad way, but, like, they're like, the hospitality team was working hard.
You got to clarify.
Attacked
you with love. You got to clarify. They attacked you with love.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yes, thank you. Attacked me with love. Because not everyone listening to the podcast can see my facial expression, so that's
right.
It was not violent. But
it was a violent kind of love.
It was a violent kind of love. I just remember them, like, taking these, like, folding chairs and, like, putting them, like, in, like, they took us outside and, like, they set us up in, like, this alley next to the church outside, and, like, they sat us down and they're like, so are you born again? And I'm like, yes we are, we're good. So I knew if we said no, it was gonna be a whole thing. And I just
smart.
And I was like, no, we're not doing this today. I don't even know what those words mean, but I'm saying yes. And they're like, great, come back. And we're like, for sure. Never went back there.
You didn't go back?
No.
Not even because of the hospitality?
That was a turnoff for me. I wanted to slip in and slip out.
That's fair. That's what you get when you go to a small church.
I had no idea. I had
That's
no
a rookie
idea.
mistake right there.
It really was a rookie mistake. And then I was like, all right, can't go to a small church, note to self. So I'm going to find the biggest church ever. Not so hard to find in New York. I found this massive, historically black church in Harlem, and the perfect place to just sort of disappear into the crowd. So I would always, like, sit far to the back and wouldn't really talk to a lot of people, and always sort of go in and slip in and slip out. And I was like, no, I'm here. I can check off the box. This is great. It's perfect. The problem is that the Holy Spirit knew I was there. So they have this like amazing choir. The church is called Bethel Gospel Assembly. You should check them out if you're ever in New York. And I wouldn't say that I'm a crier. I cry from time to time. I think a healthy amount. But I wouldn't say that I'm a crier. But every time during worship service, I would just weep. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I know they sound good, but they don't sound like that good. Why am I crying so much? What is happening to me? And I would just feel like liquid love. That's really the only way I could describe it. I just felt this all-consuming, omnipresent, like all-knowing presence just all over me, every Sunday during worship. And then I would leave and I'd be like, whoa, that was weird. And I just go on with the rest of my life and not think about it at all.
Did you talk to anyone when you were there?
Every once in a while. I wouldn't really hang around. It was really big.
And it's a big church, but could people tell that you were just sitting there weeping?
Who knows? Maybe.
Who knows? Listen, I've been there, sitting in church, crying your eyes out. I get it. Sometimes people just try not to show it.
Try not to make a scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad no one noticed because I think that's the mercy of God that no one was like, "Are you okay?" Because I didn't want to be seen by anyone there, right? I didn't want to have a relationship with anyone there. I wasn't looking for a relationship with God. I was just trying to check a box.
Right.
I wasn't trying to be part of church. I wasn't trying to do church. I didn't know what church even was. I didn't even know what the point of it was. Didn't even know whether we were worshiping a real God or not. It's just checking a box. And I just, these crazy emotions would come over me. And I feel like that was a weird thing. Crazy that happened again. All right, now off to the rest of my
moving
weekend.
Along.
Exactly. Moving right along.
So when did you find out what church really was, or if God was real?
Oh, Kelly, gird your loins. We're going down.
No one wants footage of that.
Well, we have been warned. Okay, let's go.
You don't need to gird your loins. I'm just saying I will get there. But that's actually a good question about specifically like what is church for. Let's loop back to that. If I forget to answer that question specifically, remind me. Okay,
we'll do.
So that was happening, and then my parents had this pastor friend, the same pastor friend who was also a prophet, who saw me in this vision being carried down the mountain in a stretcher. He just like wanted to talk to me, and I was just like, fine, like whatever. And it was interesting because he's from Benin, so he only speaks French, and so we'd always talk through a translator. But he would just call me up, and he just like talked to me about the Bible and how to read the Bible, and then he would just start saying all sorts of crazy things about my life. And about God's plans. And I didn't know what prophecy was, but now I know that's what he was doing. And I was just like, why is this guy saying this? A whole bunch of stuff just to make me feel good. Like, I don't know what he's on. And he would, but a lot of the things that he prophesied about have been confirmed, have been prophesied by other people, things that I've heard from the Lord. Specifically, some of the stuff he would talk about was talk about my family. He would talk about my my marriage, my household, my children, my sons, in particular. He would get very specific, and that really freaked me out. So it's like, what? I know the sons that you're talking about aren't sons that I would have via surrogacy or adoption, or or sons with another woman. Like you're talking about biological children of a man. Like this is crazy. But so those conversations were happening, and I was just sort of like along for the ride. I would just like, whatever. I'll listen. It's strange. This is all strange still, but I will listen. I was open to it. And I think the thing that was most impactful was seeing how the Lord was transforming my home and transforming my parents. So my parents started going to a new church, and they just were really learning how to walk with Jesus in an intimate and personal way. They were really they were bearing the fruits of the Spirit in a way I had never seen before. When I would visit home, it's weird because it felt like a different house. They would like, it just felt free. Is really the only way I could describe it. It just seemed like my sisters could just they seemed more free to just like be themselves. There was just far less judgment and pressure, and more gentleness and more kindness and more grace. More kind of, there was more willing to listen, and less to be quick to anger and quick to judge. And I was like, this is a completely different house than the one I grew up in. And then they would watch these like worship videos of like Bethel, and I never heard of Bethel or seen worship like that. And I was like, who are those people? Like, they are like, freedom is really the only way to describe it. They are like totally abandoned to this God, and I don't know what they're experiencing or what they're seeing. I feel like I see I feel a taste of that, when I go to my church in Harlem. But they're on another level. This is wild. And so those are all just kind of like all like, just like seeds, right? Just things, when the Bible talks about when the angel appeared to Mary and told her that she would have a son and she would conceive by the Holy Spirit, and it gave her all those promises about Jesus and who Jesus would be. And Mary buried those things in her heart and carried those things in her heart. And I kind of felt the same way during that season. They were just like little seeds of things and experiences and things that I was seeing. It was like, interesting. I didn't really know what to do with all of it yet, but I was just kind of holding it in my heart. And then my dad called me up just sort of out of the blue and gave a heartfelt and genuine apology to his reactions to when I came out when I was 12. And that was not something I ever expected. The dad that I grew up with was not one to ever apologize, no matter what you do. And, the dad that I grew up with was too proud to apologize. But this new dad that I all of a sudden had was like just too broken not to apologize. It was miraculous. And then he sort of had these visions from God and sharing those with me, and it was about me. I was like, "What are you talking to God now? You're in God's telling you stuff? What's going on? Who are you? Who are you?"
That's incredible. This is supposed to be your story, but we're listening to the salvation story for your entire family. Like that's beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's wild how the Lord uses families and relationships, right? I mean, I remember when I was growing up, and after seeing my parents' reaction to me coming out, I was like, I felt like I so clearly heard the lie, like, you will one day have to choose between your family and your freedom. Like you will not have both. I just knew like I wouldn't be able to quote unquote be myself and live the life that I wanted and also still be part of my family. I knew that there was going to come a time where there would be a crossroads, and it was just a matter of when. But that was such a lie. It was such a lie. And the Lord was beginning to show me that you can have both. In fact, that's actually what my kingdom's all about. For freedom, you've been set free, right? And you've been given the ministry of reconciliation. You can have both freedom and family. And that's actually what my plan is for you. And that's what I was sort of starting to understand. I think I understood the family piece. I don't think I fully understood the freedom piece quite yet. But I was sort of getting there. And it all felt like sort of the Holy Spirit was like working underneath the surface, but every once in a while there were just sort of like things that would come out of me. I was like, well, I don't know what that was about. Like I said to my best friend at the time once, I was like, like Christians, they just like of all like the religious people out there, they just kind of like seem the most fulfilled. Remember, I said that, and that set off like a whole massive argument. And she was like, "What? What do you mean? Like, how do you know that Muslims don't feel fulfilled?" And yada yada. I was like, I don't know. I'm just telling you. That's just what I feel like I'm seeing. And I don't think I had consciously said that to myself before. It just sort of came out. And I was just doing a lot of questioning during that time. I was really curious, and I was sharing those things with her, and those were hard things for her to listen to. And not too long ago, I was looking back at some of the things that I would write, and every once in a while, me and my best friend would write letters to each other, and my handwriting is very messy, and so I would always write a draft first to get all my thoughts out, and then I would rewrite it. So I have like the first draft of like all of those letters, and I was reading back at one of them, and I remember I was like talking about like me just like learning about God and like what it all meant, and I was like, in the letter, I was like, I could be wrong about all of this. Like, I don't know what this is, but I feel compelled to press on. Like I'm just like, I don't know what is calling. I don't know why. I am just compelled to continue to listen and to ask questions. And if I'm wrong, like I'll come back. I'll tell you I was wrong. There's nothing over that hill. It's just dead over there. I will turn around. But I just feel compelled to press on, and that's just kind of where I was at. And I remember one day I was dropping her off at the train station, and it just came out of me. I was like, everything's gonna change. And she's like, well, what? And I'm like, what? I don't even know. Where did that come from? I don't know. But it's just like the Holy Spirit preparing me, like, yeah, everything was going to change. And I started, speaking of like the church and like, did I know people at the church? Eventually I started going to these like new believer classes, even though I wasn't a new believer because I still didn't really believe, but I was like, let's just go and check it out. And it's funny, it was like it's a church of like hundreds of people. There were like 3 people in this class. It was like,
no hiding.
And what do you say?
No hiding.
Exactly, no hiding. It's like, well, I'm here now. And we were talking about Jesus and Nicodemus's conversation, and the description of born again and all of that. And I just teacher, like, I don't really feel like Jesus is meeting Nicodemus halfway in this conversation. I feel like there's he could be a little bit more giving and could compromise a little bit. And I remember the teacher just looked me like dead in the eyes and said, you don't go halfway to Jesus. You go all the way to Jesus. I was like, oh, okay, dang. All right. Noted. I also knew at that point, I was like, okay, like, what does that mean? And it was like going all the way to Jesus. Like, do I want to do that? How do I do that? And I was sort of like at this place where I was like, all right, I guess I can't really say that God doesn't exist anymore. Like, I'm just seeing too much evidence now in my family and in my own life. And I was like, this is obviously he's real. And for whatever reason, he cares about me. And now I have to decide, am I going to go all the way? Or am I going to walk away? And I was like, all right, well, here's this like massive boulder in the way. Being gay. How do I do that? Is that a thing that I can do? Can I be both Christian and gay? And so I went to the only source I could think of, Google. And
so spiritual.
Very, very spiritual. So I Google around, noodle around. And funny enough, I remember going to a talk about this at the University of Cape Town way back when I was in college. I remember there was this talk about like being Christian and gay. There was this guy who came to campus. It was very controversial, and he would talk about how you could be, pursuing same-sex relationships and still be, full professing believer. And I remember going just because I was like curious about what he had to say. But a lot of the stuff he was saying didn't really make much sense to me. And the stuff that I was Googling about, things I was reading about, there's lots of different interpretations of all different parts of the Bible and eunuchs and all of this stuff. And there are lots of, different like theologies about homosexuality and Christianity. And I don't know, I'm a lawyer now. I wasn't at the time, but, I have an analytical mind. And I was just like reading the arguments, and I was like, this is not convincing at all. I was like trying to find something that was persuasive, and just none of it was. And even though I'm not a theologian, right? I'm not an expert, but I'm like, if you can't convince me, then I don't know who you're convincing. It's not even like I have many arguments to fight back. It's just like we're reading the same thing, and like there are plain words they're not saying what you're saying they mean. And I just remember I'm like, all right, turn to the Holy Spirit, though I wouldn't have put it like that at the time. And I was like, can I do this? And I just felt the Holy Spirit saying so clearly to me, yeah, you can do that. Like, you can be, in your own mind, you can be Christian and gay, but you'll only be deceiving yourself. Like,
Wow.
that is the epitome of deception. And you'll learn when it's too late that you never really gave everything to the Lord, that you never went all the way to Jesus, because you were keeping part of the lifestyle that you wanted for yourself. And it's so crossroads. I was like, I know who the Lord is. I know what He's requiring of me to go all the way. And I know what the world is. And I know everything that you can get from the world, because I have experienced it all. And I know I can't do both. And I either go all the way back to my old life, because I don't feel like I can give everything to Jesus that He's requiring of me, or I give everything to the Lord and say bye to the things of the world. And there's just one night I was in my apartment and I was just feeling kind of down, and I remember calling my best friend, and I guess she was busy or whatever, just didn't pick up. And I was like, well, I guess Christians say that in times like these, they like call out to the Lord or whatever. So I guess I'll try doing that. And so I did. And I just felt like not like a rushing wind come into my room. And I remember looking at the window and like, is the window open? I'm like, it's not open, it's closed. What is going on? And the Lord stepped in my room. And it was like that liquid love again, but like more than I ever felt it ever before. And I was like, all right, God, like I have done everything the world says for happiness, for fulfillment, for joy, for a sense of belonging, acceptance, all those things. And there's nothing here for me. I can't go back there because there's nothing to go back to. There's nothing in the world for me, so I'm yours. Okay, I'm laying it down. So that's when I started following the Lord. And I dug more into church community. And that was sort of like a crossroads in my sort of professional life too. That was sort of like a parallel story. So I was like thinking about going to acting, and I was taking acting classes, and I was like, I can't do acting classes and be a paralegal at this really busy law firm. I have to, and if I'm gonna act, I have to quit my law firm job and and like become a waitress or whatever, and get an agent and go on to do auditions and go fully into that. Or if I'm gonna be a lawyer, like I need to start studying for the LSAT. And this all sort of happened at the same time, and I just felt like the Lord say, like, the law is what He's called me to. And like, sure, I could have some fun being an actor. I don't think I'd be wildly successful at all, and probably just a lot of frustration, and probably be a bit more self-centered with my life. So at that point, I felt like it was time for me to leave my paralegal job, and I moved back home for a year. I was studying for the LSAT. I got really involved in my parents' church, got baptized there. And during that time, like the verse I was really holding on to was, if you lose your life for my sake, you'll gain it, right? If you hold on to your life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, you'll gain it. And that was the verse I was clinging on to for dear life, because I knew I was losing my life. It was really, really painful to have to tell my best friend, like, I am going a completely different way in life. And she rejected that. And me, to some extent. Lost great connections, lost friends, gave away a lot of clothes. I was shedding an old identity, and that was really, really hard. But I knew that if I did that, the Lord would give me back a life that was more beautiful. And He did that. He has done that. He's still doing that. He will do that. All of the above. Kelly, you asked about church community. I would be nowhere without the church. Like my parents' church at that time really kind of took me in and taught me a lot of the spiritual disciplines, and helped me understand how to hear the Lord's voice and recognize His voice. And then when I moved to Ann Arbor for law school, as part of amazing churches, which is where I met Erica's sister. And I was in Ann Arbor for 3 years and in Detroit for 2 years, part of pretty much the same church. And I spent those years relearning my identity and shedding my old identity and learning who I was in Christ. And I couldn't have done any of that without the body of Christ. Right? I couldn't have fully connected with the head of the church without being connected to the body of the church, because they took me in, they discipled me, they cared for me, they were patient with me, and helped me build the spiritual foundations that I get to live on now. I constantly felt like it was 3 steps forward, 4 steps back. Like as soon as I feel like I'm gaining ground, something would happen, and I would felt like I was like my old self again. And the people that I was walking with were just so full of grace, and they just saw me like the Lord did, right? They just saw all that the Lord was building in me, and were so great to encourage me and to pull those things out. Everyone that is part of the church is needed in the church, and it makes me sad when I hear about or meet people that say they're Christian but aren't part of a church community. I'm like, you're missing out, but also we're missing out because we don't have you. We all need each other.
That's so good.
And the enemy knows sort of the things that we all carry, and he wants to keep us isolated so we don't get the benefit and the fruit of the talents and the giftings that we all have for each other. It's not for us, right? It's for each other.
And the accountability too.
And the accountability. Oh boy. Tell you
and the hospitality.
And the hospitality. I did join the hospitality team, so there.
No way. Now you're that person.
I was. Well, maybe not to that extent, but I was. I was.
You're like, I'm gonna redeem this hospitality.
I was a greeter for some time. Now I'm on the prayer team, but yes, I many years vigorously, violently greeting people,
Attacking them.
attacking them exactly. Um, no, but yeah, I mean I my my relationship with my parents is is brand new. Like I was saying, there's the freedom versus family dichotomy was false, and I do feel like I have both. And there are times that I think of my old life, and I often have this sort of like parallel universe in my mind about like, okay, what if I never gave my life to Christ? What would I be doing right now? Um, where would I be? How would I be feeling? And it's never better. It's never better. um, I just know, I would have been really, really lost. Um, and so I just counted. I count all the losses nothing, right? In comparison to gaining Christ, it's worth all the loss and then some, because I feel like I've only scratched the surface of what the Lord has in store. Um, yeah, and I feel like it's been a journey of learning how to surrender every idol, and every identity that is not of Him. I mean, obviously, the sexual identity was the biggest obstacle um, to knowing the Lord, but there are other identities and there are other idols that I have continually. He has walked with me in surrendering, and still is. And it's Jesus says, pick up your cross every day, because you need to be reminded every day. At least maybe you got it, Kelly and Erica, maybe you don't. But me, I need to be reminded every day, to pick up my cross. One last thing. So my name, Gail, means Father's beloved. And my middle name, Umotele, it's a Ghana name. Ghana is the tribe my family's from in Ghana. It basically just means I'm the firstborn daughter in the family. We all have names that are according to our gender and birth order. So, full name means Father's beloved firstborn daughter. And growing up, I really resented that name. It sounds fine, like in English. It's nothing about the name itself, but the meaning, right? I just didn't feel like Father's beloved. But I feel like since I came to the Lord, like it's me. I've been growing into my name, and it's taken on a whole new meaning, because, and it's just so wild how God does that. I mean, I don't think or know that my parents like fasted and prayed over my name. I don't think they did. I think they just picked it out of a book. But God knew. God knew that more than anything else, that I would need to know every day that I'm His beloved. Because He knew that my heart would want to tend to earn love, to try to do and be certain things, to be fully accepted and embraced. But I'm reminded each day that I actually start from a place of being Father's beloved, and everything else is an overflow from that. But yeah, so that's
Amen.
just some of the stuff the Lord has sent to hell for me. Thank you for
Sounds
listening.
like He's sent a lot.
Sure has.
And redeemed so much.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the mice though, but one day.
Still waiting for the rats to follow.
Exactly. Go off that cliff now.
Oh,
Don't be afraid.
Gail, thank you so much. Thank you for encouraging us and reminding us of the truth. And also just testifying to the Lord's redemption in your life. It's going to encourage so many people.
hope
And
so.
just like you said, there's those believers who don't go to church and they don't participate in the body, and we're missing out. I feel like we would have been missing out without this story.
Wow.
So we're really grateful you'd share.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to me talk for a really long time.
You are easy to listen
really
to.
suffered. You've really,
You're a good storyteller.
you really suffered for the cross. No, but,
There was no suffering. No suffering today.
Good. Yeah, no one was harmed in the making of this podcast. No,
No
thank
one
you
was
for
attacked.
listening. No one was attacked. No one was hurt. Yeah, it was, even the mice survived somehow. But thank you for for listening, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be
absolutely.
here. Honor to be here.
Yeah, your whole story, God's sovereignty, like beginning to end, seriously. Just and the way you're talking about the lies of the devil, like he was working overtime, but he's just got nothing on the goodness of Jesus. And I was getting, honestly, I was like ready to tear up when you were talking about coming to that crossroads, because no matter what our struggles, we've all been there as Christians. When you see your idols that you have before you and you see the cross and you have to choose, and God is always better, and Jesus always just gives to us back so abundantly. And I am so glad for you and for the body of Christ that you made that choice, and that you're here, and that you are his beloved, and you are sharing that story. It's just, it's too good. God is too good.
Ain't he? It's not fair, actually.
It isn't.
Too good. It's really not. It's really not.
That is awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gail, seriously, for taking time out of your day to sit with us and share your story. Honestly, I feel like we could talk for another probably 3 hours. Oh my gosh. That was amazing. And I know our listeners are going to appreciate it and love it. Yeah. And so thank you also to our listeners. Pleasure. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking over you. What did you say?
I don't even remember what I said. I think I was saying thank you again or something like that.
Okay, sorry, it's getting so choppy now, but I'm just going to say thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We will be back with another episode soon. Have a good one.